leadership of General Batista thrived on corruption and bribery. In January 1960, the overthrow of Batista by Fidel Castro and his revolutionary army would mark the turning point for Cuba.
December of 1959, Castro does a major policy speech in Havana, announces he's a communist. Now he's upset not just the American mafia, but now the American government.
A communist country a few hundred miles off the shores of the USA was seen as the ultimate threat. In the interest of American banks and sugar industry, Castro too had to go. However, they underestimated the strength of Cuba. The Cuban army was well prepared to defend their independence with their lives if necessary. The agency soon realized that the removal of Castro would prove more difficult than they initially thought.
It is clear that the forces of communism are not to be underestimated in Cuba or anywhere else in the world. The advantages of a police state, its use of mass terror and arrest to prevent the spread of free dissent, cannot be overlooked if the self-discipline of the free cannot match the iron discipline of the mailed fist, and the peril of freedom will continue to rise.
It was then that plans were put into place for the Bay of Pigs invasion. Under the guidance of Covert Operations Director Richard Bissell, 1,500 men, backed by full U.S. naval and air support, were to make a D-Day style landing on the beach of Playa Girón on the Bay of Pigs. They were then to join forces with what was believed to be a large anti-Castro underground coalition, recruited by the likes of George Bush, a top CIA official at that time. At the end of 1960, these plans were given the stamp of approval by President John Kennedy. However, after consulting with his brother Bobby Kennedy and other civilian advisors, several flaws were discovered. It was then that Kennedy withdrew his decision and firmly ruled out any direct U.S. troop involvement or large-scale American air support. This order was ignored. Dulles assumed that the new young president would be unable to refuse any needed support in the heat of battle if things went wrong. During the night of April 15, 1961, CIA-piloted bombers destroyed Cuba's minuscule air force. At midnight 2 days later, troops invaded the Bay of Pigs, only to run headlong into Castro's tanks. The troops were forced to dig in on the exposed beach and wait for the Navy and Air Force to arrive. It was then that Dulles made the call to Kennedy, insisting that he authorize planes and ships to bail out the stranded troops. Much to his surprise, the president flatly refused, leaving them to defend themselves.
Gallant Cuban refugees must have known that they were chancing, determined as they were against heavy odds, to pursue their courageous attempts to regain their island's freedom. But Cuba is not an island unto itself, and our concern is not ended by mere expressions of non-intervention or regret.
Although Kennedy accepted full responsibility for the fiasco, he felt betrayed and was determined to destroy the agency to prevent it happening again. Over the next few years, the CIA's intent on removing Castro designed several failed attempts on his life, including contaminating his cigars with LSD, a pill containing botulin toxins designed to make him ill, a seashell that would explode and kill him while he was scuba diving, contamination of his wetsuit with a fungus that would give him a deadly skin rash. In October 1963, Kennedy ordered the agency to cease all assassination attempts. He then made efforts with the help of Special Advisor to the U.S. delegation at the UN, William Atwood, to develop closer ties with Cuba. On November 17, 1963, Atwood reported that he had been invited to a meeting in Havana. It was the dawn of new U.S.-Cuban relations. However, this progress was stopped short when 5 days later, President Kennedy was shot in the head in a motorcade through Dallas. The CIA could now, without any revolutionary presidential interruptions, return to creating anti-communist propaganda and sabotage. By 1964, Vietnam had replaced Cuba as the greatest threat to the agency. They were determined to make Vietnam their own personal war. It would be an opportunity to restore some honor to their damaged reputation. It also provided the perfect testbed for weapons that had waited in readiness throughout the Cold War. William Colby led the Phoenix program, the centerpiece of the efforts of the CIA in Vietnam. Colby realized that the Vietnamese War had two fronts: the conventional war that was being fought against the North Vietnamese army, and the sophisticated guerrilla war that was being carried out by the Viet Cong. Project Phoenix was designed to tackle the Viet Cong problem. Operatives would pay as much as $20,000 for a crucial name or piece of information. Suspected VC and VC sympathizers were to be assassinated by special hunter-killer teams. An estimated 20,000 suspected communist supporters were killed without trial as a result of this program. Among its other covert operations was the use of the supposed-to-be commercial airline Air America to ferry its own operatives, concealed weapons and drugs into Saigon. Unfortunately, Air America in return was transporting raw opium, which after being refined in Thailand, found its way back to Saigon in the form of heroin that went on sale to the US troops in the jungles and rice fields. William Colby, like those before him, had made the vital mistake of underestimating the abilities of the enemy. The Vietnamese had been for almost a millennium fighting off foreign invaders and had by now perfected guerrilla tactics. In the end, the Americans were forced out of Vietnam. The CIA had, however, emerged victorious. Vietnam was the paving ground for some of its most frightening theories and would set the tone for the company's actions in the years to come. Iran in 1953 was the first to suffer political amputation. Kermit Roosevelt, grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, headed a secret small CIA task force. They finally supported rioting in Iran's capital, Tehran. These riots resulted in the removal of the democratic, socialist-leaning government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and the restoration of the Shah to power. They had effectively prevented Mossadegh's nationalization of colonialist oil installations, thus paving an obstacle-free path for major oil companies such as Standard Oil, Mobil, Texaco, Gulf, and also British oil giant BP. They believed they had also prevented the formation of an Islamic pro-Soviet power bloc in the Middle East, and that in the process they had inadvertently saved Israel. In reality, they had created a catastrophe, and the rest of the world would have to literally pay the price. The consequences of these actions were brought to light at the end of the 1970s, when the Iranian people, sickened by the Shah's flirtation with America and westernization, brought about the Islamic State headed by Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979. All that the CIA had tried to prevent had happened. Ayatollah Khomeini introduced Islamic reform with anti-Western sentiment. The agency had set about its task with a slightly defective myopic approach, with no thoughts of future implications. And now they had a deadly enemy in the Gulf, fueled by a puritanical Islamic leader. Grenada was invaded by the US military in October 1983. America, in response to the assassination of Morris Bishop, had acted to restore stability by reinstating democracy. Morris Bishop's PRC party was a pan-socialist one with links to Russia, Cuba, and China. His goal was to implement social reform in the island so that the population would enjoy relative equal opportunities and a good standard of living. Rumors have it that the CIA, with the assistance of Bernard Cord, the insurrection leader, had planned the demise of Morris Bishop and the PRC. CIA did not need another communist-aligned nation so close to its borders, and to prevent this, nothing would stand in their way. The CIA over the years has been suspected of playing a major role in some of the world's most scandalous executions. The CIA walked away with no probable involvement in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in the early 1960s. The former Belgian Congo country had been a vital source of minerals for America and Western Europe. When the Belgians pulled out of their African colony, they left instability and chaos behind. when UN troops failed to contain the army of Lumumba's arch-rival, General